Hello and welcome back to RTB. This is part 2 of creating a cutout card on Canvas Workspace. In this part we are going to make a seed pod, cut out shapes from the border patterns and put together text. So the next shape I'm going to make is a seed head. If you don't want to watch how to make this because it's very much the same as the flowers, then please skip to the next bit. But to make the seed head, what I need to do is go to basic shapes again and choose a couple of shapes. This time I think I want an oval, and there, I think there is a pattern in here. I think this one. So I'm going to close that again, bring down the oval, and this time I'm going to go to properties just to show you, because I haven't done that yet, that you can change the angle of it, and I want it 90 degrees. So I've just typed in 90 and pressed enter on my keyboard. So that's going to be the basic shape. Right, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I want this seed head to be a little bit fatter at the top. So I'm double clicking on the shape, and we've brought these lovely little control handles up again, and I'm just going to raise that up, make it a bit wider. Because this is something that's a little bit more from nature, kind of, I'm not going to worry too much about it being perfectly symmetrical. I don't mind if it is a little bit odd, and I think, yep, that will do fine. So if I view and fit to mat again, deselect that. What I want is for this to be cut out in the middle, and I think for that I'm going to need a couple more shapes. So I'll just go back and I'm just going to select that one and the semicircle. There we go. So I'm just holding down the Shift key because I find it just easier to do that personally, and just manipulate. What I'm going to do is eventually punch this out and rotate again, and this time I want that to fit in there. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit closer, and I'm going to need to double click on this to bring up the nodes. Now you can see this is a straight line. I want it to be a curve. So with it selected and highlighted, if we change straight to curve, it brings up these handles. Oh, and this is where I need to adjust the node. So I'm just going to go back and change that so that I'm just moving the one handle. Bring that in. So I'm double clicking on it again until I have adjusted it to the shape I want. So I could probably have done some sort of offset thing. I don't mind that that's a little bit odd because, as I say, I know nature has a lot of beautiful symmetrical things, but it also is a little bit odd. So I'm happy with that shape. I think it might still be a bit fat because once it's reduced down, when my blade has to start cutting this out. It's going to be really, really fine there. So I'm going to duplicate this. We can go to Edit and let's copy up here and this duplicate there. Sorry, that took a little bit longer because I don't tend to use these tools up here very often. There we go, duplicate. And this time I want this flipping. So rather than rotate, I'm just going to, with it highlighted, go back to Edit and flip it over horizontally. And then I can fit that to that side. I think I want those reasonably lined up. So I've selected all of them and then I'm going to align middle. That's great. Now I want to punch these bits out that I've just added. So if I go back to, actually you can right click on your mouse and you can see subtract down here. So I'll colour that in. And you can see that we've got it hollowed out. Now I want to bring these, what I want is a seed head with the, I don't actually know what they're called on the top, but I'll bring that to the front. So I've got it selected, right clicked on my mouse and bring to front. Let's fit to matte and bring this down. I'm going to need another one of these, so I'm going to duplicate that. I go to Edit and Duplicate. Put that to one side and then just play with this. I don't actually feel that there's too much that I want to do to change that, so I'm going to duplicate it again and scale this inner part down. So this is exactly like we were doing with the petals, that we're just creating a different shape. This is why if you do want to miss this or skip this, then that's fine. So I'll just center that. And I think I'll try and center it again. That's fine. So again, punch out the middle. With the subtract tool. So we're going to bring this over and I want a couple of little floppy bits, if that sounds right. So I'm double clicking inside this shape to bring up these nodes. This is straight and I don't want that. I can delete that actually by selecting it and deleting that point. Now I can manipulate that. I'm not quite sure. There. I think I'm going to have to go in a little bit closer to see what I'm doing. If you are getting confused with these handles, and I am, you can hide those control points. And I can see that I've got two here again and I don't want them. So I'm just going to select the one I don't want and remove it. I knew there was something a bit strange about that shape. Right, now I want the control handles again because I just want to pull this out. Still not entirely happy with that. I might even delete that and see what happens. Make that a straight. Change it to a curve and pull it about. If you want, you can always undo if you're not happy with what you have. If you feel like you've made a mistake, sorry. So as you can see, I'm just playing again. And if I go out a little bit more, get a sense of proportion. Oops. There we go. I think that's okay. Yes, I think that's okay. So I'm going to duplicate this by right-clicking and selecting duplicate. And I again want this flipping over. So if I go to edit and the horizontal flip, I'm going to move it over to this side and select. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen here. I think actually no, it's just these two I want the same. So align, middle, that's fine. And then we'll weld them together. As you can see, they're slightly overlapping the one in the center. I'll move that in a little bit more. I'm using the arrow keys on my keyboard to do that, to just edge it. Select all and the usual weld. And I'll pop a color in there for you. Select an object. And pull out so we can see. I'm not too happy about having this exposed like that, so I'm going to add a circle or an oval. I think I'll go for the oval and bring that down. And just change that colour. Put a fill colour in. Make it slightly different. And just line these up. And I can bring that down, and I'm going to use my buttons on my keyboard again, my arrows. So I don't know if you saw what I just did then. What I did was I hid all of those little lines. So if I just go back up again, you can see I didn't want these popping out. So I've maneuvered them so that they're hidden. And we'll just weld all of that together. I right click and I can choose weld. There we go. So that's my seed head. I'm now going to create the stem using the path tool. I won't go into too much detail about the path tool because the gentleman crafter on getting to know the path tools in ScanNCut Canvas on YouTube has done a really good explanation of all the features of this path tool. But if I select the path tool, I am going to make my stem using straight lines, and I will show you why. So basically, if I just depress the left button of my mouse, release it, move across and click again, then move down and release and click again, release, click, release, and then I'm just going to close it by going back into the very first node that I started with. That's probably going to be just a little bit too thick, but it doesn't matter because I have to adjust it anyway. And now I'll show you what happens if I use the path tool but use the curves with it. So if I click, release, click, and then this time click and drag to get a curve, you can see that we have this flippy floppy line that when I click again ends up like that, sort of loops over, and then I come up here and I close it, and I have a very odd shape that I have to try and manipulate. So if I was to double click inside here to bring up those nodes, that looks like a straight line, but it is actually a curve. So it means that somewhere here, where that's got a dark outline, has a handle on it. So it's a case of having to really work hard to manipulate that. And then I have to find that and then change that into a straight. So there's a lot more fiddling around to do with that one. So I'm just going to get rid of it by hitting the delete key on my keypad, selecting it and hitting delete, that is. Then we'll go back to this, and I want to double click on it or click inside it twice to bring up my nodes, and I want to change this straight line into a curve, and we can see that we've got our control handles. And then I'm going to do the same again with this one and change that to a curve, and we've got our control handles back again. And so all I'm going to do is just pull these control handles to make a nice curve and pull those in to mimic it. And I just want to stretch this down a little bit this way and maybe that up. No, that's okay like that. So you just, I know I keep on saying mess on until you're happy with your shape. So just do that a little bit more. That's fine. And there we go. And I'm going to join those two together by selecting them both. Can you see that I've just moved the stem so that it overlaps the seed head just a little bit? Click on that and weld. There we go. There's our seed head. So the next thing I'm going to do is use the border patterns to separate them off so that I can make a leaf and a bird. So if we just go to border, and if you scroll down, you can see there's quite a number of lovely patterns that you can choose from. But I want this leaf because I want these sort of cut out shapes. I'm going to show you two ways of breaking up the border. I also want a bird. So if I start with the bird, we'll just separate off one of these birds, and this is one way of doing it. So if I zoom in and I double click in the shape, that's brought the nodes up, and we've got all of our little control points again. I'm going to hide these handles, and what I need to do is to break up this pattern. So if I select one of these little control points, or nodes, sorry, I can just break it, open, close, outline. Then I'm going to draw a fence to select these all in one go and delete those points. Don't worry about that, we'll just draw a fence again and delete. Don't want to delete that. You can select the little, I call them nodes, individually. You don't have to select them the way I'm doing it. I'm holding down my shift key to select more than one at a time. Oops. So that's using my shift key, and I'm just going to delete those. And it'll just keep coming. If I zoom out, can select more of the pattern all at one time. So I've double clicked. I'm going to delete all of those until we've got closer to the little bird that we want. Draw my fence around, delete, and I'm going to delete that one too. And then we need to rejoin the shape, so just select any node, and there we go. That's a straight, as I've shown you previously. We can change that to a curve. And then if we have a look at the handles, we can just adjust that. And we've got our lovely little bird. So if I go back to view, fit to mat, that's the bird, and we can set that aside. Now, this is probably a faster way of showing how to separate these borders up. So let's go back to shapes. So I need basic. And I want an angled shape. I'm going to close that, and we're going to use this as a way of splicing this leaf off. So I'm just going to bring those a little bit closer together and zoom in. You may have seen the gentleman crafter showing you how to do this. This is how I learned this technique, by watching him. And I think, is it Jen Fei Fan Bolzer? I'm not very good at pronouncing her name. She also shows this technique. So what I'm just doing is I'm just trying to create a nice thin little splicing point. So this shape should be in front. If I colour it in, you can see what I have. And you can see that I've got my leaf shape pretty much how I want to cut it. That's where I want the cut to be. So I select the leaf and I select the shape that I've just manipulated, and we're going to select divide on the process overlap tools. So I can now move this aside and I've got my leaf separated off, and I can delete that. I'm just going to show you, if I undo all of that, I hit divide, but I could have just as easily, I just check I haven't separated anything. No, I could just as easily have selected both and selected remove overlapped. That would have probably done it a bit faster for me. And I still have that. So I'm going to delete that because I don't need it anymore. And this is where I need to hit divide, because with the process overlap tool, it's practically grouped these. If I right click this, you can see that I can't ungroup, which means I do have to divide. And that's fine. I can select that now and delete it. So I've got my leaf. Now I want to just work on it a little bit more because I want to get rid of the jaggedy edges. I'm going to hide my control points and I want to zoom in really close to see what I'm going to do. So remove that, and I think I'm going to take all of that lot out actually. Then I want to change this to a curve. So change from straight to curve. Let's have a look at our handles. And we can make that a little bit more leafy. Just bring that down there a bit and zoom out. And there, I've got a leaf. Now I want to bring together all of the shapes that we've made so far. So I'm going to copy the flowers and the seed head onto this workspace rather than make another new project. To copy the shapes or patterns from previous projects, we need to go to the patterns bar and go back and open up my projects. Then just drag the patterns that you want to copy to your workspace. We are copying, so this won't affect projects that you've already saved. They'll stay exactly the same when you go back into your My Projects menu. So I'm just reducing them down and moving them to one side. So the last thing that I need to do, no, there's two more things. I need to make another leaf shape, which I'll do now. Oops. Go back to basics, and where was that lovely little oval I had before? There's that one, or there's more of an elliptical shape. Never find them when you want them, can you? Yeah, I'm going to stick with that because I like the rounded edges. So I literally just want a couple of these. Let's duplicate it and turn it. And yeah, those will pretty much be my additional little leaf shapes. You can mess with the nodes again to change them if you want it a little bit more pointy. So if I change that node to being able to manipulate the handles separately, I can just make that end a bit more pointed. And the same with this one. Double click in it, change this handle, highlight it so that I can just pull it. So I can just pull it separately. There we go. And we've got a couple of little leaves. Just group those two together for now. So the final thing that I need to do is the text before I start putting it all together. So I'm going to save this as object. So now that I have this saved, I'm going to continue to work on this space, and so I want to make the words thank you. So I can go to my patterns bar and I can select text, and I can choose a font down here that I fancy, or I'm going to close that and use this text converter that's free to download. It's a type converter app from Brother. Now, if I type in thank, I don't actually want it in this font size type. I know I want it in brush script, so if I double click along here, I knew that was going to happen. I think I need to scroll up here a little bit and type B. That's it. So I want to scroll down onto the B's till I get to brush script. There we go. And now I can type in thank. And I just preview that. And that's what it looks like. It gives me a nice little loop on the K there. So I'm going to close that and I'm going to save it. So I'm going to save it to my desktop, and I'm going to change the name to thank. You can see that it's an FCM file. I can't save it directly to the Brother files, it won't let me. So I can't bring it directly onto Canvas Workspace, I have to save it onto my computer or a USB first. So we'll save that, and that's saved on desktop. Then I'm going to change this to U, preview it. I'm not really happy with that Y, but I'm not going to look through a whole load of fonts to find one that has a nice loop on, because there might not be something that I can use without copyright. So we're going to save that to the desktop as well, and I'm just going to rename it U so I know what I'm looking for. And we're going to close that. So the way we bring those fonts in is we can either go to import your SVG FCM files here, or we can go to project and we can import them here. So no file is chosen, choose your file, and there we are, thank, and OK. Now you'll see that they've come in separately. I'm just going to undo that, and I need to group it if I'm going to move it. So I'm just right-clicking on my mouse and group. There we go. Move that to one side and bring in U. There it is, U. OK. And I'll just group that again. And we'll zoom in and take a little look at them. Now what you can do is you can move them so that they slightly overlap each other if the font is such that they're separated. Thankfully these are all grouped together, so I don't need to worry about that, but I'm going to add a colour. And as you can see, we have the centres filled, which means that I need to ungroup these again and remove the centres. So ungroup, and let's have a little try. If I subtract, that's because I selected all of those letters. There we go. So I want to weld that. So weld, and that should move around as one piece. And these are joining up too. I'm going to weld those. And there we go. I just want it to be something like that. Maybe a little bit lower. And we'll just weld those two together. So I held down the Shift key on my keyboard to select both, and we'll weld. And that's my font. So I'm happy now that I have all of the elements I need to start to make my card. So please join me for part 3, which is the final part. I will be putting all of the elements together and completing the card.